My fiancé said I was too boring for him and called off the wedding. 2 years later, he begged for me back. I was engaged to his best friend. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Brandon, who'd stood beside Colt at his brother's wedding just 4 months after ours fell apart. That's when I first really noticed Brandon. During the reception, while Colt danced with his new bride, a marketing executive who skydived and spoke 4 languages. The breakup had been devastating. We'd been together since college, 5 years of building a life, picking out furniture, arguing about whether we needed a KitchenAid. Then one Tuesday over takeout, he said it. "You're just so predictable. I need someone who challenges me, who's spontaneous." He moved out that weekend, taking the coffee maker and most of my confidence. I became smaller after that, quieter. My friends tried setting me up, but I'd just sit across from perfectly nice men and feel like a cardboard cutout. At work, I stopped volunteering for presentations. My therapist called it depression. Brandon called it understandable. We'd run into each other at a mutual friend's birthday party. He found me hiding on the balcony trying to avoid Colt, who'd shown up with the marketing executive. Brandon handed me a drink and said, "You don't have to be interesting all the time. Sometimes steady is exactly what people need." We started meeting for coffee, then dinner. He never pushed, never made me feel like I had to perform. With Brandon, I could just exist. He liked that I meal prepped on Sundays. He thought it was sweet that I'd memorized Pride and Prejudice. He found my risk aversion calming after years of watching Colt chase adrenaline. 8 months in, he kissed me in his kitchen while I was explaining how to organize a spice rack. It was the least romantic moment imaginable and somehow the most perfect. When we got engaged, I knew Colt would find out. What I didn't expect was the phone call at 11:30 p.m. on a Thursday. His voice was raw, desperate. "I made a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. You were never boring, you were safe, and I didn't realize how rare that was." "You're calling me at 11:30 at night to say this?" I asked, staring at Brandon's jacket on my chair. "Please, just meet me. She left me last month. We were good together. We can be good again." I almost laughed. "I'm engaged, Colt." Silent. Then, "To who?" "Brandon." The sound he made was somewhere between a gasp and a groan. "My best friend?" Over the next 2 weeks, he called 34 times. He showed up at my office with flowers. He sent emails at 2 a.m. about how he'd changed. He told Brandon they needed to talk, man to man, about loyalty. Brandon told him to leave me alone or lose his number permanently. The wedding was scheduled for June. Colt somehow got my mom's number and convinced her I was making a mistake out of spite. She called me crying. I hung up on her for the first time in my life. Then Colt showed up at our engagement party. He walked in during toasts, his face unshaven, his eyes wild. Brandon's hand tightened on mine. Colt pushed through the crowd until he stood directly in front of us. Before I could speak, he dropped to his knees, pulled out a ring, and said the words I'd once dreamed of hearing. "I'm begging you, choose me. I'll spend the rest of my life proving you weren't boring. You were everything." The room went completely silent. Brandon's face had gone pale, his jaw clenched. Everyone was staring at me, waiting. And in that moment, I realized Colt's ring was the same one he'd given me 2 years ago, the same one I'd left on his nightstand. He hadn't bought something new. He'd just kept it through his entire relationship with someone supposedly more exciting. I looked at Brandon, then at Colt, then at the 80 people holding their breath. "Get up," I said quietly. Colt stayed on his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Please, I know I hurt you. I know I was an idiot, but we had something real, something worth fighting for." "We did have something real," I agreed. "And you threw it away because I wasn't exciting enough, because I preferred movie nights to rock climbing, because I liked routine and you needed chaos." "I was wrong," he said, his voice breaking. "I thought I needed adventure, but what I needed was home, and you were my home." Brandon finally spoke, his voice low and controlled. "You need to leave, now." "This isn't about you," Colt snapped, finally looking at his former best friend. "This is between me and her." "Actually," I said, surprised by how calm I felt, "it's not. There is no me and you anymore. There hasn't been for 2 years. You made sure of that." "But, do you know what the worst part was?" I interrupted. "It wasn't that you left. It was how you left. You made me feel like being dependable was a character flaw. Like wanting stability meant I was broken somehow. You made me apologize for who I was." The room was so quiet I could hear someone's phone buzzing across the venue. "I spent months believing I needed to change," I continued. "That I needed to be louder, wilder, more spontaneous. And then I met someone who loved me exactly as I am. Someone who never made me feel like I was too much or not enough. Someone who showed up." Colt's eyes flicked to Brandon, and something ugly twisted in his expression. "He's in love with you because I was. He's always wanted what I had." "Don't," Brandon warned. "It's true," Colt said, standing up now, the ring still clutched in his fist. "You think this is real? He's been waiting in the wings since college, watching us, hoping we'd fail." "That's not," Brandon started. "Isn't it?" Colt's voice rose. Tell her. Tell her how you used to ask me how our relationship was doing, how you'd always be there when we fought, ready with coffee and sympathy. You've been circling for years." I looked at Brandon. His face had gone red, but he met my eyes steadily. "I was your friend first," he said to Colt. "And yeah, maybe I noticed her before you did. Maybe I thought you were lucky, but I never acted on it. Not once in 5 years did I cross that line. Only because you were waiting for me to screw up," Colt shot back. "No," Brandon said quietly, "because she was happy, and I cared about her too much to ruin that, even if it killed me to watch." The confession hung in the air. I'd had no idea. None. "So you admit it," Colt said triumphantly. "This whole thing is—" "I fell in love with her after you left," Brandon said, his voice steady now. "After she was free. After you destroyed her and walked away without looking back. I was there when she couldn't sleep, When she stopped eating, when she had to leave your shared friend group because seeing you with someone new was too painful. Where were you? Off being spontaneous? Colt flinched. I didn't pursue her, Brandon continued. She found me. And when she did, I made damn sure I would never make her feel the way you did. Never make her question her worth. Never make her believe she needed to be anyone other than who she is. I reached for Brandon's hand. He gripped it like a lifeline. Colt looked between us, and something in him seemed to crack. So that's it? You're really choosing him? I'm not choosing him over you, I said. I'm choosing me, and I choose someone who chose me first. For a moment, I thought Colt might argue more. Instead, he looked down at the ring in his hand, then set it carefully on the nearest table. I hope you're happy, he said, and I couldn't tell if he meant it or if it was a curse. He walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Slowly, conversations resumed. Someone turned the music back up. Our friends came over to check on us, offering hugs and reassurances, but I barely heard any of it. I was staring at Brandon, seeing him differently now. All those coffee dates when I'd rambled about my day, the way he'd always remembered small details, how he'd never pushed, never pressured, just waited for me to be ready. Did you really love me back then? I asked when we were finally alone in the parking lot. Brandon leaned against his car, exhausted. Since sophomore year, you were in my philosophy class. You got into an argument with the professor about whether true altruism exists. You were so passionate, so sure of yourself. And I thought, that's the most interesting person I've ever met. I was boring to Colt. Colt's an idiot, Brandon said simply. You were never boring. You were just wasted on someone who couldn't appreciate subtlety, who needed everything to be loud and obvious. I thought about the past 2 years, how hard I'd worked to rebuild myself, how Brandon had been there, quietly supporting, never asking for anything in return. Why didn't you tell me? Because you weren't ready. And because I needed to know that when you chose me, it was really me you wanted, not just a safe harbor after a storm. And now? He smiled, tired but genuine. Now I know. You stood in front of everyone and chose this. Chose us. That's not running from something. That's running toward something. I kissed him there in the parking lot, under the streetlights, while our engagement party continued inside without us. And for the first time since Colt had walked into my life all those years ago, I felt completely certain. This was right. This was real. This was home. But the story didn't end there. Because 3 days later, Brandon's phone rang at 6 a.m. It was Colt's brother, Nathan. There had been an accident. Colt had been drinking, driving too fast on a mountain road. His car had gone over the edge. He was in intensive care, barely conscious, and he was asking for Brandon, and for me. Brandon looked at me across the breakfast table, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. We don't have to go, but we both knew we did. Whatever had happened between the three of us, Colt had been Brandon's best friend since childhood. They'd grown up together, shared everything, and despite the pain he'd caused me, I'd spent 5 years of my life with him. You don't just turn that off. The hospital was 90 minutes away. We drove in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. I kept remembering the Colt I'd first met in college, the one who'd brought me soup when I had the flu, who'd stayed up all night helping me study for my biology final, who'd proposed on the beach at sunset and cried when I said yes. When had that person disappeared? Or had he never really existed? Nathan met us in the waiting room. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Thank you for coming. I know things have been complicated. How is he? Brandon asked. Not good. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, possible brain injury. They're doing everything they can, but he trailed off, unable to finish. A nurse appeared and told us we could see him, but only for a few minutes. His room was in the ICU, all machines and beeping monitors. Colt lay in the bed, barely recognizable under the bandages and tubes. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. He's been in and out of consciousness, the nurse explained. When he's lucid, he keeps asking for you to. As if on cue, Colt's eyes fluttered open. It took him a moment to focus, but when he saw us, something like relief crossed his face. You came. Of course we came, Brandon said, his voice thick. Colt tried to smile but winced instead. Hurts to move, hurts to breathe, hurts to exist, really. Seems fitting. Don't talk like that, I said automatically. Why not? It's true. I've been hurting since the engagement party, since I realized I'd lost you for real this time. Not just in theory, but actually lost you. His eyes found mine. I got drunk, got in my car, didn't really care what happened. My stomach turned. Colt, I'm not asking for sympathy, he said. I'm just telling you the truth, for once. I've been lying to myself for so long, lying about what I wanted, what I needed. I thought I needed excitement, but really I was just terrified of being ordinary, of settling down, of becoming my father. Brandon stiffened beside me. I knew Colt's dad had left when Colt was 12, abandoning his family for a younger woman and a fresh start. It had shaped everything about how Colt saw relationships. I saw how my dad got bored, Colt continued, his words slightly slurred from the pain medication. How he felt trapped. I was so scared of turning into him that I sabotaged the best thing in my life. Convinced myself you were too boring when really I was just terrified of being happy. You should rest, I said, uncomfortable with this raw honesty. I'll rest when I'm dead, which, according to the doctors, might be soon. He tried to laugh, but it turned into a cough that made the machines beep frantically. The nurse rushed over, checked his vitals, adjusted something on his IV. When she left, Colt looked at Brandon. I'm sorry, man, for everything, for the party, for the things I said. You were right. You were always the better man, better friend, better partner. I just couldn't admit it. Brandon's jaw worked, emotions playing across his face. We've been friends since we were 6 years old. You taught me how to ride a bike. You were the best man at my brother's wedding. How did we get here? Because I'm selfish, Colt said simply. Because I wanted everything and appreciated nothing. Because I took the people who loved me for granted, and now I'm dying alone. You're not dying, I said firmly, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. Maybe not today, but eventually, we all are. And I'll die knowing I destroyed the only real family I had. He looked between us. Promise me something, both of you. Be happy. Don't waste time being scared like I did. Don't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect version of yourselves. Just love each other and be grateful for it every single day. I felt tears sliding down my face. This felt too much like a goodbye, too final. And when you get married, Colt added, his voice getting weaker, when you have kids and buy a house and build a life together, remember me sometimes. Not the asshole I became, but the person I was before I ruined everything. The friend who loved you both, even if I had a terrible way of showing it. The monitor started beeping more urgently. Colt's eyes closed again, his breathing becoming labored. The nurse rushed back in with a doctor. You need to leave. Now. We were ushered out into the hallway. Through the window, we watched them work on him. A controlled chaos of medical intervention. Brandon put his arm around me and I leaned into him, both of us numb with shock and grief. Nathan joined us, his face pale. What happened in there? He said goodbye. Brandon said quietly. We waited for hours. Nathan paced. Brandon sat with his head in his hands. I stared at the vending machine across the hall, watching people buy coffee and snacks, going about their normal day while inside this building someone we'd all loved was fighting for his life. Finally, the doctor emerged. His expression told us everything before he spoke. I'm sorry, he had a massive bleed we couldn't control. We did everything we could. Nathan made a sound like a wounded animal. Brandon went very still beside me. I felt like I was watching the scene from outside my body, unable to process that Colt was gone. Just gone. The man I'd planned to marry. The man who'd broken my heart. The man who'd loved me in his own broken way. Dead at 29 because he'd been too drunk and too reckless and too desperate. The funeral was 5 days later. The whole town turned out. Colt had been popular, charismatic, the kind of person everyone remembered. His mother, who I'd once called Mom too, hugged me and sobbed into my shoulder. His brother gave a eulogy that made everyone cry. Brandon spoke about their childhood, about the boy Colt had been before pain and fear had twisted him into someone else. I couldn't speak, couldn't find the words. How do you eulogize someone who'd been both your greatest love and your deepest wound? After the service, people kept approaching me with condolences, as if I were still his fiancé. As if the past 2 years hadn't happened. It felt surreal. Someone asked if I was planning to keep the ring he'd tried to give me at the engagement party. I hadn't even thought about it. It was probably still sitting on that table at the venue, unless someone had turned it in. Brandon and I left early, unable to handle more well-meaning sympathy. We drove to the park where we'd had our first real date, sat on the bench overlooking the lake. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, Brandon said, I keep thinking about what he said, about being grateful every day, about not wasting time. Me too. Are we terrible people? He asked, for being relieved this is over? For being glad we don't have to see him anymore? Deal with his attempts to win you back? I don't know, I admitted. I'm sad he's dead. I'm angry at him for driving drunk. I'm guilty that my last real conversation with him was telling him I'd chosen you. I'm confused because I feel like I should be more devastated, but mostly I just feel numb. Is that normal? I think grief is messy, Brandon said, especially when it's for someone who hurt you. We're allowed to feel multiple things at once. We sat there until the sun started setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Eventually, Brandon stood and held out his hand. Come on, let's go home. Home. The apartment we'd moved into together 2 months ago. The life we were building. I took his hand and let him pull me up. As we walked back to the car, I felt something shift inside me. Colt was gone. The past was truly past now. All that remained was the future, and the choice to make it meaningful. That night, lying in bed with Brandon's arms around me, I thought about everything that had happened. The breakup, the rebuild, the new love, the dramatic confrontation, the tragic ending. It felt like a lifetime compressed into 2 years. Brandon's breathing had evened out, but I knew he wasn't asleep. His hand moved slowly through my hair, the way it always did when he was thinking. What if he was right? I whispered into the darkness. About what? About you waiting in the wings. About you wanting what he had. Brandon was quiet for so long I thought maybe he wouldn't answer. Then, in the beginning maybe, I saw you with him and I thought, lucky bastard. But that's not why I fell in love with you. I fell in love with you because of who you were when you were alone. The way you'd bite your lip when concentrating. How you'd leave sticky notes on your planner with little motivational quotes. The fact that you cried during every Pixar movie. Even the bad ones. All the small things Colt never noticed because he was too busy looking for something bigger. He noticed, I said. He just didn't value them. Then he was a fool. I turned to face him in the dark. Do you think he really tried to hurt himself? Or was it just an accident? Does it matter? I don't know, maybe. If he did it on purpose, then we're responsible somehow. If we just talked to him after the party, if we'd— Stop, Brandon said firmly. You can't carry that. Colt made his own choices. All of them. Breaking up with you, marrying someone else, showing up at our party, getting behind the wheel drunk. None of that is on us. But it felt like it was. At least partly. I'd rejected him publicly, humiliated him in front of everyone he knew. What if that had been the final push? What if I'd just met with him privately, let him down easier? I can hear you thinking, Brandon said. And I know where your mind is going. Don't. Colt's problems started long before you. His dad leaving, his fear of commitment, his need to constantly prove himself. You didn't create those things. You just became the target of them. Maybe he was right. Probably he was right. But guilt isn't logical. It's a weight that settles in your chest, and refuses to leave. Over the next few weeks, I found myself obsessing over every interaction I'd had with Colt, looking for signs I'd missed, wondering if I could have saved him somehow. I went to therapy twice a week. My therapist, Dr. Rivera, listened patiently as I spiraled, then said something that stuck with me. You're grieving not just the person he was, but the person you wanted him to be. The person who could have loved you the way you deserved. That person never existed. And mourning someone who never existed is the hardest grief of all. She was right. I'd spent years making excuses for Colt, seeing potential instead of reality, building a fantasy version of him in my head that bore little resemblance to the actual man. It was easier to believe he'd had some great transformation coming, that he'd wake up one day and realize his mistakes, than to accept that this was who he was. Someone who ran when things got hard, who hurt people and then expected them to forgive him because he was hurt too. Someone fundamentally unable to be what I needed. Brandon, meanwhile, was dealing with his own guilt. He'd lost his best friend, and their last conversation had been an argument. He kept pulling up old photos on his phone, showing me the Colt he'd known before everything fell apart, the two of them at age 8, missing their front teeth, holding up a fish they'd caught. At 16, after their soccer team won the state championship. At 22, graduation day, arms around each other's shoulders, full of optimism about the future. It's like he was two different people, Brandon said one night, scrolling through memories. The Colt I grew up with and the Colt he became. I don't know when one turned into the other. Maybe he was always both, I suggested. Maybe we just didn't want to see the parts that made us uncomfortable. Brandon closed his eyes. I knew he was struggling after his dad left. I knew he had commitment issues, but I thought he'd grow out of it, that loving you would fix him somehow. Love doesn't fix people, I said. It just shows you who they really are. A month after the funeral, Colt's mother called. She wanted to meet with me and Brandon, separately. I went first, driving to her house on a Tuesday afternoon. She'd aged in the past weeks, grief carving new lines into her face. She served tea I didn't drink and cookies I couldn't eat. And then she said, I found something in Colt's apartment. I think you should have it. She handed me a leather journal. Inside, in Colt's messy handwriting, were entries dating back 2 years. The first one was dated the day after he'd broken up with me. I can't believe I actually did it. I left her. I thought I'd feel free, excited, ready for adventure. Instead, I just feel empty, like I cut out the part of me that knew how to be happy, but I can't go back now. That would be admitting I was wrong, and I'm not wrong. I just need time to adjust. I flipped through the pages. Each entry was the same. Colt, trying to convince himself he'd made the right choice, listing all the reasons I'd been wrong for him, then contradicting himself in the next breath, describing his new relationship with the marketing executive, always comparing her to me, always finding her lacking in small, specific ways. She doesn't laugh at my jokes the same way. She doesn't know how I take my coffee. She's exciting but exhausting. Is it supposed to be this hard? Then entries about seeing me at the party with Brandon, about realizing he'd lost me, about the spiral that followed. I got drunk and drove past her apartment last night, watched the lights in her windows, imagined her inside, cooking dinner, watching TV, living a life I'm not part of anymore. I wanted to knock on the door, beg her to let me in, but I just sat in my car until 2 a.m., crying like an idiot. The final entry was dated the night of our engagement party. I'm going to tell her. Going to lay it all out, everything I feel, everything I've realized. Maybe it's too late. Probably it's too late, but I have to try. If she says no, at least I'll know I fought for her. If she says yes, maybe I can be the person I should have been all along, the person she deserved. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. His mother watched me with sad eyes. He loved you. In his own broken way, he really did, I whispered. But love isn't enough. Not when it comes with this much pain. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty, she said quick, or suggesting you made the wrong choice. I just wanted you to know that his last thoughts were about making things right, about being better. He died trying to get back to you. But he died driving drunk, died being reckless and selfish, the same patterns that had destroyed our relationship in the first place. Even in his final moments, he'd chosen the easy escape over doing the actual work. Thank you for showing me, I said, standing. But I don't think I can keep this. I understand. She took the journal back. What about you? Are you happy now? With Brandon? I thought about the question. Was I happy? Or was I just relieved to be done with chaos? I'm building something real, I finally said. Something steady. Something that feels like it might actually last. That's more than Colt could ever offer you, she said, and there was no bitterness in it, just acceptance. He was my son and I loved him, but I'm not blind to who he was. You deserve someone who shows up, who stays. I'm glad you found that. I hugged her goodbye, this woman who'd almost been my mother-in-law, and drove home feeling lighter somehow, like I'd been given permission to stop carrying Colt's pain. Brandon's meeting with Colt's mother was shorter. She gave him a watch, one that had belonged to Colt's grandfather, passed down through generations. He wants you to have it, she'd said. You were the brother he chose. Brandon wore it every day after that. A reminder of the friendship they'd had before everything went wrong. Life moved forward the way it always does. Slowly at first, then faster. We postponed our wedding by 6 months, wanting space between the funeral and our celebration. My mom finally apologized for believing Colt's manipulations. My friends stopped asking how I was doing with such careful, concerned voices. Work returned to normal. The apartment we shared filled with small domestic touches. A bookshelf we built together, artwork we picked out on weekends. A cat we adopted from the shelter. A gray tabby we named Widget because Brandon said she looked like a mechanical component. Normal, boring, beautiful life. The kind I'd always wanted. the kind Colt had made me feel guilty for wanting. On what would have been Colt's 30th birthday, Brandon and I drove to his grave. We brought flowers, sat on the grass, and talked to a headstone about nothing important. The weather, the cat, our wedding plans. Brandon told stories about their childhood, laughing at memories of stupid pranks and teenage rebellion. I talked about the good times too, the early days when Colt had been gentle and attentive, before fear had turned him bitter. I forgive you, I said finally, my hand on the cold marble, for all of it. And I hope wherever you are, you found peace, the kind you could never find here. We left as the sun was setting, and I didn't look back. 6 months later, on a perfect October afternoon, I married Brandon in a small ceremony at the Botanical Gardens. My sister was my maid of honor. Nathan, Colt's brother, stood beside Brandon as his best man. There was an empty chair in the front row, a subtle acknowledgement of the friend who should have been there. But the day wasn't about absence. It was about presence, about choosing each other, every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. During the reception, Nathan pulled me aside. Colt would be happy for you. I know he made a mess of things at the end, but underneath all that drama, he just wanted you to be happy, even if it wasn't with him. You think so? I know so. He told me once, right before the accident. He said if he couldn't have you, he was glad it was Brandon, that at least he knew you'd be taken care of. I wiped away tears, careful not to smear my makeup. I wish he'd told me that. Instead of showing up and making a scene. That was Colt, always choosing the dramatic option, always making things harder than they needed to be. Nathan smiled sadly, but he was still my brother, and despite everything, I miss him every day. Me too, I admitted. Not the person he became at the end, but the person he was, the person he could have been. We stood there for a moment, two people bound by shared grief and complicated love, watching Brandon dance with my mother across the floor. Then Nathan squeezed my shoulder. Go dance with your husband. Don't spend your wedding day thinking about ghosts. He was right. I joined Brandon on the dance floor, his arms coming around me automatically, and let myself be present in this moment. This perfect, hard-won moment. Later, after we'd cut the cake and tossed the bouquet and said goodbye to our guests, Brandon and I stood alone in the empty venue. The DJ was packing up his equipment. The caterers were clearing the last tables, and we were there in our wedding clothes, exhausted and happy. You okay? Brandon asked, reading the expression on my face. Better than okay. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. No regrets? Only that it took me so long to get here. He kissed me, soft and sweet, and whispered, we have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time. We did, and we would. But first, we had a honeymoon to catch. A flight to Ireland leaving in 8 hours, a trip we'd been planning for months. As we left the venue, I saw the last of the flowers being packed away, the remnants of a celebration, and I thought about Colt one final time, about the ring he'd offered me, the life he'd promised, the person he'd never quite managed to become. Then I thought about Brandon, steady and true, who'd loved me through the worst of it and never wavered, who'd chosen me not because I was exciting or spontaneous, but because I was me. And that was enough. That was everything. We drove to the hotel where we'd spend one night before flying out. In the elevator, Brandon pulled me close and said, I love you, boring movie nights and all. I laughed, the sound echoing in the small space. I love you too, even though you fold your socks the wrong way. There's no wrong way to fold socks. There absolutely is, and we'll be arguing about it for the next 50 years. Can't wait, he said, and I knew he meant it. Our room was on the 12th floor, overlooking the city. Brandon carried me over the threshold even though we'd been living together for over a year, because traditions matter, even the silly ones. We ordered room service, too tired to go out, and ate overpriced burgers while watching terrible reality TV. It was perfect. Ordinary. Exactly what I'd always wanted. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. My stomach dropped. Irrational fear flooding through me. For a split second, I thought it might be Colt, some impossible message from beyond. But it was Nathan. Just wanted to say congratulations again. Colt was wrong about a lot of things, but he was right about you. You're the most interesting person I know. Not because you're exciting, but because you're genuine. That's rare. Take care of my friend. He's one of the good ones. I showed Brandon the message. He read it, then set the phone aside. He is one of the good ones, I said. Your brother, I mean, for saying that. He's dealt with a lot. Losing Colt hit him harder than he lets on, but he's trying to find meaning in it, to honor Colt by being better than Colt was. That's all any of us can do, I said. Try to be better than our worst moments. We fell asleep tangled together, the TV still playing softly in the background. And when I woke up to sunshine streaming through the windows and Brandon's arm around my waist, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete peace. No anxiety about the future, no grief about the past, just contentment in the present. Ireland was everything we'd hoped. Green hills and ancient castles and pubs filled with music and laughter. We rented a car and drove through the countryside, stopping at random villages, getting lost on purpose. One afternoon, we found ourselves at the cliffs of Moher, standing at the edge of the world, wind whipping around us. Colt would have loved this, Brandon said, staring out at the ocean. He would have jumped, I said. Found some way to make it an adventure, to prove he was fearless. And we're just standing here, taking pictures like normal tourists. Exactly. I leaned into him. Boring and alive. I'll take it. He laughed, the sound carrying across the cliffs. We stayed until sunset, watching the sky turn colors that didn't seem possible in nature. Pink and orange and purple, all bleeding together. A couple near us asked if we wanted them to take our photo. We posed, Brandon's arms around me, the ocean behind us, both of us grinning like idiots. That photo is now framed in our living room, a reminder of this moment, this trip, this life we chose. When we returned home 2 weeks later, there was a package waiting on our doorstep from Colt's mother. Inside was the watch Brandon had been given, now engraved on the back, for the brother he chose. May you have the time he didn't. There was also a small box addressed to me. I opened it carefully. Inside was a necklace I'd never seen before, delicate silver with a small pendant in the shape of a compass. A note read, "Colt bought this for you, years ago, before everything fell apart. He never gave it to you because he said you didn't need it. You always knew where you were going, but I think you should have it now. Not as a reminder of him, but as a reminder of yourself. You found your way, even when the path was dark. I'm proud of you. We all are." I put the necklace on and haven't taken it off since. Not because it's from Colt, but because it's true. I did find my way. Through heartbreak and loss and grief and confusion, I found my way to exactly where I needed to be. Brandon got a promotion at work. I started taking photography classes, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. We talked about buying a house, maybe getting a dog. Normal, boring, beautiful plans. The kind that build a life. 1 year after our wedding, we found out I was pregnant. Unplanned, but not unwanted. We sat in the bathroom, staring at the positive test, both of us in shock. "A baby," Brandon said, his voice full of wonder. "We're going to have a baby. Are we ready for this? Probably not, but we'll figure it out." We did. 9 months later, our daughter was born. 6 pounds, 11 ounces, with Brandon's eyes and my stubborn chin. We named her Iris, after my grandmother. Colt's mother visited the hospital, bringing gifts and tears. "She's beautiful," she said, holding Iris with the careful reverence of someone who knows how precious and fragile life is. "Colt would have loved being an uncle. He would have been terrible at it," Brandon said with a smile. "He would have taught her all the wrong things." "Probably," she agreed. "But he would have loved her fiercely. That was never his problem. He loved fiercely. He just didn't know how to love wisely." Parenthood changed everything and nothing. We were exhausted, overwhelmed, covered in spit up, and living on 90-minute sleep cycles. But we were together. We were a team. On the hard days, when Iris wouldn't stop crying and we were both at our breaking point, Brandon would remind me, "We chose this. We chose each other. We choose to stay." And we did. Every day, we chose to stay. Chose to work through the fights about whose turn it was to change diapers. Chose to laugh when Iris projectile vomited on the one nice outfit I had left. Chose to be grateful for the boring, exhausting, beautiful chaos of family life. Iris grew, started smiling, then laughing, then babbling. On her first birthday, we threw a small party. Nathan came, and my parents, and a handful of close friends. As I watched Brandon play with our daughter, making her giggle with silly faces, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The breakup that destroyed me, the rebuild that saved me, the new love that healed me, the tragedy that haunted me, all of it necessary, all of it leading to this moment. This family, this life. "What are you thinking about?" my sister asked, coming up beside me. "Everything. Nothing. How lucky I am." "You deserve to be lucky, after everything you went through." "Do we get what we deserve? Or do we just get what we get, and we decide what to do with it?" She considered this. "Both, maybe. You got dealt a terrible hand with Colt, but you played it well. You didn't let it break you." "It did break me. I just learned how to put the pieces back together differently." That night, after everyone had left and Iris was asleep in her crib, Brandon and I collapsed on the couch. "She's going to ask about him someday," I said. "About Colt. What will we tell her?" "The truth, that there was someone before Daddy. Someone who taught me what I didn't want, so that when I met Daddy, I knew exactly what I did want." "Will you tell her how he died?" "When she's old enough to understand. I'll tell her that sometimes people make bad choices, and those choices have consequences. And that's why we always call a cab when we've been drinking." Brandon pulled me close. "You're going to be a good mom. We're going to be good parents," I corrected. Together. The years passed the way they do, quickly and slowly at the same time. Iris grew into a toddler, then a little girl. We bought the house we'd dreamed about, in a neighborhood with good schools and quiet streets. We got the dog, a golden retriever named Biscuit who thought he was a lap dog despite being 70 pounds. We built a life that was stable and safe and maybe a little boring, and I loved every minute of it. On what would have been Colt's 35th birthday, we visited his grave as we did every year. But this time, we brought Iris. She was 4, old enough to understand some things, but not others. "Who's this?" she asked, pointing at the headstone. "This is someone Daddy and Mommy knew a long time ago," I said. "He was Daddy's best friend. Where is he now?" "He's in heaven, sweetheart." "Can we visit him there?" "Not yet. Someday, when we're very old, we'll get to see him again." She thought about this, then picked a dandelion and placed it carefully on the grave. "Here you go, Daddy's friend. So you're not lonely." I looked at Brandon, tears in both our eyes. Our daughter, offering kindness to a man she'd never met. A man whose choices had shaped her parents' lives in ways she couldn't begin to understand. "That was very sweet of you, Iris," Brandon said, scooping her up. As we walked back to the car, Iris asked, "Mommy, what was he like?" I thought about how to answer, how to be honest without being cruel. He was complicated. He could be kind and funny and exciting, but he also struggled with some things, and sometimes his struggles hurt other people. Like when I get mad and hit, sort of, but bigger, grown-up-sized problems. Did he say sorry? He tried to, but sometimes sorry isn't enough. Sometimes we hurt people too much for sorry to fix it. She absorbed this with the serious expression she got when thinking hard about something. Then, "But you forgave him anyway?" "Yes, because forgiveness isn't about saying what they did was okay. It's about deciding you don't want to carry the hurt anymore." "Oh," she paused. "That's smart, Mommy." Brandon laughed. "Your mom is very smart. That's why I married her." That, and she makes good pancakes, Iris added seriously. That too, Brandon agreed. Life continued. Iris started kindergarten. Brandon's career flourished. I opened a small photography studio specializing in family portraits. On weekends, we'd explore nearby towns, finding local ice cream shops and parks. Simple pleasures, boring adventures. Everything I'd ever wanted. Sometimes late at night, I'd think about Colt. Wonder what he'd be doing if he were still alive. Would he have finally settled down? Found someone who could handle his intensity? Or would he still be chasing the next exciting thing, never satisfied, never content? I'd never know. And I'd made peace with that. He was part of my story, an important chapter, but not the ending. The ending was still being written, day by ordinary day, in a house filled with laughter and dog hair and the beautiful chaos of real life. On our 5th wedding anniversary, Brandon surprised me with a trip back to Ireland. My parents watched Iris and we retraced our honeymoon, visiting the same places, taking similar photos. But everything felt different now. We weren't newlyweds anymore, fresh and uncertain. We were partners, tested and proven. Standing at the cliffs of Moher again, the wind just as fierce as I remembered, Brandon said, "I'm glad we got the boring life." Me too. Though I'd argue it's not boring, it's just not chaotic. Semantics. Important semantics. He smiled, pulling me close. Do you ever think about what would have happened if Colt hadn't shown up at the engagement party? If he just quietly accepted your choice? Sometimes. But I don't think he could have. That's who he was. All or nothing, fire or ice, no middle ground. And you prefer the middle ground? I prefer solid ground. The kind you can build on. We stayed until the sun set, just like we had 5 years earlier. But this time, we didn't take any pictures. We just stood there, present in the moment, grateful for the path that had led us here. When we returned home, Iris ran into our arms, talking a mile a minute about everything she and Grandma had done. Biscuit jumped around our legs, tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. My parents looked exhausted but happy. This was home. This was everything. That night, tucking Iris into bed, she asked out of nowhere, "Mommy, will you and Daddy ever stop loving each other?" My heart seized. No, sweetheart, never. Why do you ask? My friend Cassidy's parents are getting divorced. She's really sad. That must be hard for her. But every family is different. Daddy and I chose each other very carefully. We promised to keep choosing each other every day. Even when you fight, especially when we fight. Fighting doesn't mean you don't love someone. It just means you're working through something together. She yawned, satisfied with this answer. Okay, I love you too, baby girl. As I left her room, Brandon was waiting in the hallway. You handled that well. I had a good teacher. My therapist after Colt left taught me that love is a choice, not just a feeling. You have to choose it, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard, he echoed, repeating what had become our mantra. We went downstairs, poured wine, sat on the porch watching fireflies. Normal, boring, perfect. This was the life Colt had been too scared to want. The life he'd convinced himself was a trap. But sitting there, Brandon's hand in mine, I knew the truth. Stability isn't a trap. It's a foundation. And on it, you can build something that lasts. Years later, when Iris was 12, she came home from school with an assignment. Write about someone who changed your parents' lives. She wanted to write about Colt. I'd told her more about him as she got older, about the relationship that ended, the friendship that was broken, the tragic accident. She knew he was part of our story, even if she'd never met him. Is that okay? She asked nervously. I know it's kind of sad. It's more than okay, I said. What do you want to know? She asked questions I'd never expected. What was he like when he was happy? What did he and Daddy do together? Did I really love him once? I answered honestly, showing her old photos I'd kept, telling stories that made him human rather than just a tragedy. He sounds complicated, she finally said. He was. Most people are. But you and Daddy aren't complicated. You're just steady, I laughed. We're definitely complicated. We just don't show it as much. We learned from watching what doesn't work. Her essay was beautiful. She wrote about how Colt's death had taught me and Brandon to appreciate what we had, how his mistakes became lessons we carried forward, how even people who hurt us can teach us important things about who we want to be. Her teacher gave her an A. More importantly, she seemed to understand something profound about life, that pain can have purpose, that tragedy can teach, that we're all just doing our best with what we know. When we showed Nathan the essay, he cried. He'd be so proud, he said, to know that even in death, he was still teaching, still mattering. He always mattered, Brandon said quietly. I was angry at him for a long time, but he was still my brother in every way that counted. We decided to start a scholarship in Colt's name for students studying psychology or counseling, people who wanted to help others navigate the kind of pain Colt had struggled with. It felt right, transforming his loss into something constructive. The first scholarship was awarded to a young woman whose father had died in a drunk driving accident. She wanted to become a therapist specializing in addiction. At the ceremony, she said, "I'm studying this because I believe people can change, but they need support, tools, someone to believe in them even when they don't believe in themselves." I thought about Colt, about whether he could have changed if he'd had the right help. I'd never know. But maybe through this scholarship, we could help others find the support he never did. Life has a way of coming full circle. Brandon and I celebrated our 15th anniversary. Iris was preparing for high school. We'd been through job changes and health scares and family drama and all the normal ups and downs of long-term commitment. And through it all, we'd chosen each other. Chosen boring movie nights over exciting adventures. Chosen stability over spontaneity. Chosen the life that felt like home. On our anniversary, Brandon gave me a gift. A photo album he'd been working on for months. Inside were pictures documenting our entire relationship. The early coffee dates, the engagement, the wedding, Iris being born, family vacations, random Tuesday nights on the couch. Every ordinary moment that had built our extraordinary life. The last page had a photo from our first date at the park, and next to it, a photo from last week in the same spot. We'd aged, obviously. Grayer, more wrinkles, heavier. But our smiles were the same. The way we looked at each other was the same. The contentment in our eyes was the same. 15 years, Brandon said. Still not bored. Still not bored, I agreed. Though you did tell the same dad joke 12 times last week. It was funny every time. It was funny 0 times. He grinned, pulling me close. 16 more years and we'll be boring and old together. Can't wait. And I meant it. Every word. This was what Colt had been afraid of. Growing old with someone. Watching the excitement fade into routine. But he'd misunderstood. The excitement doesn't fade. It transforms. It becomes deeper, richer, less flashy but more meaningful. It becomes the excitement of seeing your daughter's school play together. Of finishing each other's sentences. Of knowing exactly what the other person needs without asking, of building something that outlasts youth and beauty and novelty. That night, I pulled out the journal Colt's mother had shown me all those years ago. I'd asked for it back eventually, wanting to understand. I read it again, seeing it differently now, seeing not just his pain but his fear, his desperate attempts to convince himself he'd made the right choice, his gradual realization that he'd destroyed something irreplaceable, his final, tragic attempt to fix what couldn't be fixed. You okay? Brandon asked, seeing what I was reading. Yeah. Just thinking about roads not taken, about what my life would have looked like if he'd never left, if we'd married, had kids, tried to make it work. You think it could have worked? No. I think I would have spent my life trying to be enough for someone who would never be satisfied. I think I would have lost myself completely. Then I'm glad he left, even though it hurt you, even though it set all this in motion. I'm glad, because it brought you to me. I closed the journal. Me too. I just wish he could have found his own peace, his own boring, beautiful life. Maybe in the next life, Brandon said. Maybe he gets another chance. Maybe. We sat there in comfortable silence. The kind that only comes from years of knowing someone completely. The kind Colt had been too scared to want, too afraid to trust. And I felt grateful, not just for what I had, but for what I'd survived. For the breakup that devastated me, for the rebuild that strengthened me, for the love that saved me, for the tragedy that taught me, for all of it, the beautiful and the brutal, the boring and the extraordinary, because it had all led here, to this moment, this life, this family, to home. And I wouldn't change a single thing.